Welcome to Catholic Answers Live, the program where you participate with your questions about apologetics and evangelization, including the most important theological, spiritual, moral, and social issues facing the world today. Call now with your question for today's guest. Toll free 1-888-31-TRUTH. That's 888-318-7884. Now, from San Diego, Catholic Answers Live.
Hello and welcome to Catholic Answers Live. I am Cy Kellett, your host. It is Tuesday, and that means open forum. If you have a question about the Catholic faith, if there's something that troubles you in the Catholic history, if there's something that maybe confuses you about Catholic theology or philosophy, and we're happy to take your call, 888-318-7884. We welcome calls from Catholics and non-Catholics alike. Anybody can call with any question at all about the Catholic faith. Again, that number, 888-318-7884. If you prefer the spelled version of it, it's 888-31-TRUTH. Our guest next hour will be Tim Staples, so you'll be in very good hands that hour. And this hour, you're in very good hands because we have Patrick Madrid. That's kind of a great lineup. If you have Patrick Madrid followed by Tim Staples, you're doing all right. Patrick, as almost everybody knows, is a radio host and author and speaker and editor of books and former editor of a magazine and all kinds of stuff like that. Currently, he is the host of the Patrick Madrid Show, mornings from 9 to noon Eastern out here on the West Coast. That is 6 to 9. And you can find that on the Relevant Radio Network, which spans from Maine to Maui. How's that sound, Patrick? Maine to Maui?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay.
Hey, how you doing? How you doing, Si?
I am very well. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Thanks for having me back on. I always love coming on the Catholic Answers Live program.
Well, it's always, people, there's certain favorites, and Patrick Madrid is among the favorites, so we're always happy when you're here.
Thank you.
Yeah, and when you do your morning radio show, you're doing 3 hours of radio, which I just admire so much. Is that people I don't think maybe realize quite how much work that is, and you'll cover all kinds of things. You'll cover, you're commenting from a Catholic perspective on just about everything happening out there in the world.
Mm. Yeah, and that's my remit, I guess they'd say, is to offer commentary on things that are happening in the news, certainly things that are happening in the church, and there's no lack of those things nowadays, that's for sure. But also a heavy dose of apologetics, and there are a lot of people listening to the program who are Catholic, but there are also quite a number of people who listen to the Patrick Madrid Show who are not Catholic and maybe Catholic curious. So whether it's atheists or Protestants or whomever it may be, It's a very interesting mix of topics and issues that we get into every day.
Yep, and then the thing about you, though, is then you continue that throughout the day on your Twitter account, and I follow you on Twitter. I think lots of people do, and I often say to people, Patrick Madrid has it figured out on Twitter. So, like,
I don't know if that's exactly true, but I'm working on it anyway.
Well, the thing is, okay, so the recent things happening in the church, many not good things among them. If I'm just, not paying attention to the news or whatnot myself, you'll update us. Hey, this came out. This happened. That happened. You'll give us a little insight into your thinking about it. But I feel like I know what's going on as long as I've got Patrick Madrid on my Twitter.
Oh, you're very kind. And, I'm just one of many people out there. I mean, certainly the great work being done by EWTN, and there are various independent Catholic radio organizations out there. So we're all in the same army, you might say. We're all trying to do the same thing, and I just try to do my little bit, keep people informed and offer commentary, as you say, for 3 hours a day. And believe me, by the time those 3 hours are over each day, I still have more material to get to.
Wow.
So the only problem is I have no more energy at the end of those 3 hours.
Plus, they turn the microphone off. I don't know if they've told you that, Patrick, but after the 3 hours, they just turn your mic off.
Just click it off.
They click it off. So if you keep talking,
no one's going to hear me.
Your family might. So I guess because you're a person who, you've been a public a Catholic person in public life for a long time. Do people seem particularly down right now, or are you feeling people like they've just got the stamina and we're going to have to just get through this? What are you experiencing?
Well, I mean, from where I stand, I'm hearing, certainly on the program, a fair amount of people who feel confused, for one thing, by all the stuff that's happening. And I understand their feeling, because this is a papacy unlike any papacy I've ever, I've never lived through anything like this, nor have I ever heard of anything like this. But it is challenging in that sense. A lot of people are seeking clarity. And so during this time of uncertainty, I think confusion is a big feeling that people have. Also, people are becoming galvanized, and interestingly, in two different directions. I'm noticing people who are becoming very strident in their defense of things that are happening, their defense of Pope Francis. And certainly we want to pray for and love and defend the Holy Father. Any Holy Father, we want to do that. That's in our blood as Catholics. So
Right.
it's not as though that's a foreign instinct. I certainly validate the instinct. But at the same time, there are, given all the things that have been coming out in the news recently, the Archbishop Vigano testimony, for example, and before that, a few weeks earlier, the controversy about the changing of the catechism on capital punishment. And it seems that there's a steady drip, drip, drip of things that are coming out that are causing people to become plugged in and galvanized in a way that I don't think we saw maybe 5 years ago, 10 years ago.
Yeah,
there was a
right.
more kind of a, laid back approach to it. And I think one upside, Cy, is that people are getting engaged with their faith, which is a good thing. And hopefully it will lead to good things.
Yeah, it's right. Being engaged with your faith is, that's the way to go. That's the general. And I'm glad to hear that you see that hope, because God brings good out of even the most crazy situations, and this is a crazy one. But if we can see, well, he's still working. He didn't quit his job. He's just maybe giving us
Right.
some clearer idea of what our job is.
Well, times of upheaval and tumult are, in a counterintuitive way, they're actually good for the church, because it creates a kind of vitality in the church that can be lost, or it can ebb away during times where everything is fat and happy and there's no
Yeah.
real challenge, and we
Right.
just can sort of sit back and take our ease. This is not one of those times, that's for sure. And I think there are dividends, good spiritual dividends for Catholics, if they are paying attention and if they are willing to engage and really go deep in their faith.
Yeah,
And stay close to Jesus more
Right.
than ever before.
And one of the things people are doing is I think there's a way in which the average lay Catholic is supporting things like National Catholic Register or Catholic radio stations or television stations. And that is making a huge difference. Like the lady might say, well, our voice isn't being heard. Every time that these radio stations come on in the morning, or, people find them, you are changing the world. And I just wish people would understand that, well, yeah, maybe you don't have the power to fire this bishop or, correct the Pope if that's what you think, but you have a lot of power. And Catholics, we're not where we were 20 years ago. We have a whole set of tools for sharing the faith that we didn't have. And that's been lay Catholics have done that.
Absolutely. 20 years ago, when cell phones were just getting started, just becoming widely available, that was kind of the first step in this direction, where you could communicate quickly with people. Before that, you either had to be near a landline,
Yeah.
or you had to go find a payphone. And you can't even find those anymore now. Can't find payphones anymore. So now with Twitter and Facebook and all the means of nearly instantaneous communication, there is an upside and a downside. But as far as the upside is concerned, yes, Catholics, even just rank and file lay Catholics like you and me, we have a voice. And the housewife in Sarasota, Florida, or the dentist in, Tucumcari, New Mexico, has a voice and can be heard through blogs and these other social media platforms. And ultimately, I think overall that's a very good thing, because that helps to feed that sense of belonging and being engaged and having having a stake in everything that's happening. We're not just passive bystanders. We're not just spectators.
Right.
We're actually in the game, and that's a good thing.
That is a good thing. Patrick, I become unfair and unjust when you're on, because the callers wait, but I just like talking with you, and so I use up their time, and I'm going to stop doing that. We have to take a quick break. I will let you know. Patrick Madrid is our guest this hour. 888-31-TRUTH is our number, and the topic is whatever is on your mind about the Catholic faith. If you have a question for Patrick about any aspect of the life, the faith, the history of the Catholic Church, you are welcome to call 888-318-6187. 7884. We'll be right back with more of El Guapo right after this. John, I want to welcome you into the studio. John,
howdy.
John Sorensen is the Chief Operating Officer of Catholic Answers. He is the guy who comes around the building and says, "Get back to work." And don't you, John?
Sometimes. It's a super fancy title, right?
Yeah, well, no, but you're the visionary in many ways of this place, too. I mean, I think you're, well, anyway, I don't want to talk about what a great job you're doing. But
Yeah.
I find that boring to talk about what a great job you're doing. But the apostolate is doing quite a few good things that you want to come share.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. We have we've been working on revamping Catholic.com. I mean, every several years or whatever, you have to work on that.
Yeah.
And this time we decided to work with with an outside group of young folks who are helping us to improve the user experience over there. And so we've spent the last several months working with them. It's a group called Sherwood Fellows.
Oh, yeah.
And I actually met them through a group called Catholic Creatives.
Yeah.
Actually, Donna Barrick and I are going to they have a conference this week. It starts this week.
Where's the conference?
It's in Dallas.
Oh, so and we're a sponsor of that conference. I
Yeah,
think.
yeah.
You're that taken with them.
I am actually. I really like their. I just really like their enthusiasm for the faith. It's infectious. It's good to be around. You know, you know how it is. You get in the Catholic bubble and you hang around with other. You know, I've been in this game for 11 years now, and it's.
Yeah.
It's nice to get an outside, fresh perspective on things. Especially these folks are younger, so that's really what I'm looking at, because they're the future. You know, they are our future, and so I put a lot of stock into their opinions and research. They did a lot of research for Catholic.com, and I think people will be really impressed. We're hoping to launch the site after the first of the year.
Okay.
So we'll be working really hard. We're done with the design phase, and that's the phase that they helped us with.
Yeah.
And then now we have our guys inside working on that.
And you were the last time you were here on the microphone, I think, with us was we talked about the Catholic the Bible Project.
The Bible Project.
Yeah.
So
whatever happened with that?
After the first time I talked to you, so we have a list of all of the topics that we want. In case people don't know what the Bible Project is, it's basically it's a list of topics. And you can click on the topic, and it will bring up a menu of Bible verses you can use to defend that topic. So when you meet your fundamentalist Bible Christian friend who says, "Oh, well, where's this or that Catholic thing in the Bible?" You can click on this resource. Will help you. You can click on the topic, and then it'll bring down a list of verses. And our apologists here are working on. For each verse, explaining the context of the verse, and then also explaining how you can use the verse in doing apologetics. And then on top of that, they're working on adding a list of the most common objections that you use for example, what is it? Matthew 16:18, you're Peter and on this rock.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, right. And so, when I was first coming to church, I tried to use that, and they said, "Oh, well, that's Peter's confession," or, something like that. So
you get the other objection then in the Bible Project, and then you get how you handle that.
Yeah, you get the verse and how to use it in apologetics, and then our apologists are also going to give you possible objections that you might run into when you try to use that verse to defend a Catholic particular. So, and we're working on, so the apologist finished the first round of that. It was 10 topics, and that went out in a special report through Catholic Answers. And right now they're working on the next 10. So there's 50. So it's going to be a little while before it goes up on the internet. But in the meantime, we're working on how are we going to present that on Catholic.com, and we're making a lot of progress there. So it's good.
So what if people want to be a part of it? All this stuff going on.
Just go to Catholic.com and click on the giant "Be a Part of It."
It's almost like I knew that.
Yeah, right.
Go to Catholic.com, and there'll be a pop-up that'll say "Be a part of it," and you can kind of plug into all this stuff that Catholic Answers is trying to do to.
Yep, there's information about all that stuff there. So just go to Catholic.com, click on that banner, and presto.
All right, I want to turn the tables on you now.
Okay.
Get back to work.
All right,
John.
I will.
Get back to.
I'm down.
John
you later,
Sorensen, the Chief Operating Officer of Catholic Answers. Thanks very much, John. We'll be right back with more Patrick Madrid right after this.
So, some Jehovah Witnesses knock on your door. You're ready to defend Jesus' divinity, but they throw you a curveball and deny the divinity of the Holy Spirit. What do? Well, first, you could turn to 1 Corinthians 2:11, where Paul says, "No one comprehends the thoughts of God except the Spirit of God." If the Spirit can comprehend the infinite thoughts of God, he must be infinite, and thus God. You could then turn to Acts chapter 5, verses 1 through 4, and here Peter rebukes Ananias and Sapphira for lying to the Holy Spirit. But then a few sentences later says they lied to God. How can lying to the Holy Spirit be the same as lying to God unless the Holy Spirit is God? So with verses like these, you can hit that curveball and defend the divinity of the Holy Spirit. I'm Carlo Broussard with a ready reason for Catholic Answers, Catholic.com.
Have you heard who's reading the register? Why, it's Marcus Grota.
I believe EWTN's National Catholic Register is unique from other newspapers in that it not only is committed to reporting the news from the world and the church and our faith, but it does so through the lens of the faithfulness of our Catholic Church.
For a 3-month free subscription to the National Catholic Register, go to ncregister.com and click on the 3 months free banner or call 1-800-421-3230.
Call now with your question. 888-318-7884. This is Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live, open forum. Patrick Madrid, our guest. Patrick, the host of the Patrick Madrid Show across the whole country, 6 to 9 a.m. Eastern Time on the Relevant Radio Network. Patrick is also, well, if you've been to a Catholic conference or something lately, you might have run into Patrick. He's all over the place, really. He'll go anywhere to share the good news of Jesus Christ and his church. And so you can find out all about that at his website, which I believe is patrickmadrid.com. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. patrickmadrid.com. And then the show website is relevantradio.com/Patrick.
Oh, slashes. It's too much for me, Patrick.
Got to have those.
Yeah. And then, but the really easy one is Twitter, at Patrick Madrid. And then you should start following
it. There it is.
It's a lot of fun, and it'll keep you up to date on what's going on. Patrick, about 1 million calls for you right now. You ready for them?
Okay, great. Yeah, ready.
Okay. Let's go to, wait a second. Let's go to James in New Iberia. James, you are up first. Your question for Patrick Madrid.
Yes, hello.
Hi,
Mr.
James.
Patrick Madrid. Can you hear me? Am I coming in loud and clear?
I hear you loud and clear. Thank you.
Great. Listen, I'm guessing you saw Francis's comments earlier today. First off, I'm a traditional Catholic. We hold to the Sedevacantist position. And I'm guessing you saw the comments from Francis earlier today where it seemed to suggest that Catholic laity are tools of Satan simply because they're wanting to, they're wanting answers into his role in the whole pedophilia homosexual scandal. And so my question is this, and I could read the quote for you if you'd like me to read the quote for you and your audience.
It's okay,
James. You haven't heard it.
If you why don't you just give us the question for Patrick?
I don't mind if he quotes
my
it because I
question
want to
is
make
this.
sure I know which particular
fair enough.
quote, if
Okay,
that's
fair enough. My bad.
Because
Go
I
ahead,
may
James.
be thinking of something different.
Okay, yeah. His quote was this. Quote, "In these times, it seems like the great accuser has been unchained and is attacking bishops. True, we are sinners, we bishops. He tries to uncover the sins so that they are visible in order to scandalize people." Unquote. Now, I'm not the only one that took it that way. If you go to EWTN, if you go to other Catholic apologist sites, they too took it the same way, that essentially he's calling the laity who's wanting an investigation into all of this essentially Satan, unchained, accuser, and so forth. So my question is this. I'm not going to name names, but there's certain apologists, bishops, and priests that say there's nothing to Bogano's claims and that Catholic laity should remain silent. And even if Francis is guilty, that we should not call for his resignation. I'm hoping you have a different perspective. I think you do, and I'm hoping you can relay that to members of, Catholics everywhere.
Got it. Well, I appreciate you putting me on the spot, and I don't mind it, actually. The quote that you're referring to, I saw earlier today in the Catholic Herald, a British Catholic newspaper, and so I wanted to make sure that we were talking about the same thing. So the first thing is, clearly Pope Francis is referring by name specifically to the bishop, but I can see the implication that you draw from that, by implication, if people are trying to get to the truth of what we think we know, and what Archbishop Vigano has said he knows in his 11-page manifesto, his testimony, then I don't think it's a far-fetched reaction for people to wonder, is Pope Francis suggesting that people who are trying to uncover the details and get to the bottom of this, is he equating them with Satan? Now, I'd like to give Pope Francis the benefit of the doubt and assume the best. So I will just say for the record that I hope that's not what he meant by what he said. But as often happens, much of what Pope Francis says can be taken in a variety of ways. And because of the inherent ambiguity in much of what he says, I'm simply going to say that I want to give him the benefit of the doubt and hope that that's not what he meant. Now, let's ground this question firmly in what Jesus Christ said. I think all of us can agree that what he said goes. And he said, "You shall know the truth, and the truth will set you free." And so the idea of the truth being somehow off limits or somehow in league with the devil, if people are trying to ascertain a truth that they have a right to know, because after all, many people who are affected by this are parents and grandparents and sisters and brothers and seminarians and priests and the lay faithful in general who have been harmed by these things that have been done by the clergy. We have a right to know the truth. And so I just want to stake my claim on what Jesus said, "You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." And I truly believe that that is the only path to healing for the Catholic Church. The truth of these matters must be known. And to the extent that Archbishop Vigano is lying, then let that come out. If he's lying, then let that come out. If he's telling the truth, then let that come out. And let the chips fall where they may, as the saying goes. And furthermore, because it's possible that there are some men who are named in that 11-page letter who may in fact be innocent, and we would not want innocent people to have their reputations besmirched. So partly out of a desire to protect the good name of people who deserve their good name, I think the truth must come out. So I personally am hoping and praying that the Holy Spirit will nudge Pope Francis and all the other people who are involved in this to do the right thing and to say one way or the other what's actually true or not, and then let the chips fall where they may.
James, we will leave it there. Thank you very, very much for that. Excuse me, was that? Yeah, that was James in New Iberia. Thank you, James. Patrick, help me out, just because I like to, when we have technical terms, let people know what they mean. He said he's a sede vacantist.
Oh, sede vacantist.
That means?
Yeah, it's a Latin phrase that we sort of adopted into English that means it's somebody who believes that there's no validly elected pope on the seat or the chair of Peter. So in Matthew 23, Jesus refers to the scribes and Pharisees, and he says, do what they tell you, but don't follow their example, because they give bad example by not doing what they actually teach. He says they have taken their seat on the chair of Moses. And that term chair there from Matthew 23, kathedros in the Greek, we get the word ex cathedra from in the Latin. It's symbolic of the authority of the Bishop of Rome, and any bishop for that matter. So when somebody talks about a sede vacante, that refers to an empty chair. And the meaning behind that is that the throne of Peter, the Bishop of Rome, is actually empty. There is no actual valid Bishop of Rome. And various sede vacantist theories will go back, some to Pope Pius XII, some to Pope Pius XI. So there's even among that group, there's a division of opinion as to where you actually say this is the last legitimate pope. But for the moment, we can say that all other things being equal, most of the sede vacantists would argue that from Pope John the 23rd forward, or certainly from Pope Paul VI forward, none of the purported popes have actually been valid popes. That's what that phrase means. And I'm sure you know that, but for those who don't,
yes,
that's what that's referring to.
I appreciate that. And then if I could just follow up with one thing, Patrick, because I do I want people to fully understand it, that generally that comes with a rejection of what is sometimes called the Vatican II Church, but the Second Vatican Council. Is that correct?
Yes. And there are reasons that Sedevacantists will say that they don't accept Vatican II on issues, for example, the Second Vatican Council statements on religious liberty and other issues, including, and maybe perhaps in some ways more importantly, the revision of the liturgy. So the Novus Ordo Missae, the Latin phrase for the new order of the Mass, as promulgated by the Second Vatican Council, they almost to a man would reject that and say that that's an example of the problems in the church. Now, I don't share that view. I'm not a Sedevacantist, never have been, never will be. The only time I'm ever a Sedevacantist is when a pope dies, and then the chair is in fact empty. Then we're all Sedevacantists. But other than that, I don't share that view.
That is correct. Patrick Madrid is our guest. Thank you so much for helping us understand all that, Patrick. 888-318-7884 is the number. Anybody is welcome to call, whether you're Catholic or non-Catholic, whether your type of Catholicism is Sedevacantist or more
Catholic.
Catholic. Okay, thanks for helping me, Patrick. You're
Real
welcome
Catholic.
to call 888-318-7884. More Open Forum with Patrick Madrid right after this.
Call us now with your question on Catholic Answers Live.
A generation ago, Christian parents didn't have to worry about how to explain transgenderism to their 9-year-old children or help their teenager deal with mockery at school for believing in traditional marriage. But today, as our culture decays, we have to know how to talk to our children about these issues. In Made This Way, How to Prepare Kids to Face Today's Tough Moral Issues, Layla Miller and Trent Horn give parents the crucial tools and techniques to form children with the understanding they need, appropriate to their age and maturity level to meet the world's challenges. If we're not teaching our children how to understand tough moral issues, then the world will. Read Made This Way and learn how to give your kids a firm foundation on which to build a life of moral clarity and happiness. Order your copy of Made This Way today by calling 1-888-291-8000 or logging onto the shop at Catholic.com.
With the recent commemoration of the 50th anniversary of the release of Humani Vitae, there have been fresh attacks on Catholic teaching from outside and unfortunately inside the Church. That's why Catholic Answers thought it critical to provide a vigorous affirmation of Pope Paul VI's prophetic wisdom with our newest book, Inseparable: 5 Perspectives on Sex, Life, and Love in Defense of Humani Vitae. We asked 5 distinguished contributors to reflect on and defend Humani Vitae from 5 perspectives, each of them compelling, together forming a mosaic of truth. Don't be caught uninformed when the topic comes up among friends, family, and coworkers. Order your copy of Inseparable today by calling 1-888-291-8000 or by visiting the shop at Catholic.com.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I am Cy Kellett, your host. Our guest this hour, Patrick Madrid. Next hour, Tim Staples will be here. And our topic, whatever's on your mind as far as the Catholic faith. Often we have something about the Catholic faith that maybe we would like to explain to somebody else. And you need some help figuring out, how do I explain that to this person? We feel comfortable with the explanation for ourselves, but we need help. Well, that's perfectly welcome too. If you need help explaining some aspect of the Catholic faith to someone, Patrick is the perfect person to ask that question to. 888-318-7884 is the number, 888-31-TRUTH. Patrick and I we continued our conversation a little bit at the break, and I was just saying I think that sometimes there's the truth, and then there's also just confusion because people have various memories of what happened, and some stuff gets put down on paper and some stuff doesn't, and somebody uses a term in the canonical sense of that term, and someone else is using the common, the common sense version of that term. And you had an insight into that, Patrick. Go ahead and share it.
Well, sure. And this is for my own, sanity. I've got to think through a lot of these things, as we all do.
Yeah.
And that is that it seems without question that Pope John Paul II and Pope Benedict are implicated in what Archbishop Vigano said in his testimony, insofar as on their watch, not only were many of these depredations against children being perpetrated, and not just children, but young adults and others.
Right.
So you know how the old saying, "Not on my watch," kind of thing. Well, the thing that I found interesting as a dimension of this whole thing is the question: to what extent were those two popes informed? Now, leaving aside for a minute to what extent Pope Francis is being informed, and I'm pretty sure he's being far more informed because he's got people, some of whom I would call henchmen, who closely monitor social media. They monitor Facebook and Twitter, and then I'm pretty confident that a lot of that information is well known. But with regard to Pope John Paul II and Pope Benedict, I get the impression that there were gatekeepers who, for whatever their reasons,
that's another level
shielded
of this.
them from a lot of this. Okay, so that's part of it. I wonder, now I have no way of knowing, but I think the bare fact of the matter is that yes, we must face up to the fact that a lot of these things, a lot of this mess happened and was unfolding during the pontificate of Pope John Paul II and Pope Benedict, both of whom I very much admire and very I have esteem for them. And so this is not a knock on either of them. But it would be unfair for us to sort of turn the other way and say, well, this is all Pope Francis under Pope Francis's watch, because it's not. You know, this goes back quite a long way, and even before Pope John Paul II. And I'll give you one quick example, because I know we got callers. Marcial Maciel, who was the founder of the Legionaries of Christ. He was a Mexican priest. He started a religious order that became, for a time anyway, it was a powerhouse order, massive amounts of seminarians, vocations. And it turns out that he was a fraud and a criminal and a sexual abuser, and many other things can be said about him. He scammed Pope John Paul II. He scammed him, and Pope John Paul II fell for him hook, line, and sinker, and I believe honestly believed that the scurrilous attacks made against him were false, because one theory, and this might have been George Weigel's theory, I don't know where I heard this first, but that during the communist occupation of Poland after World War II, that it was routine that the Soviets and their Polish proxies, that they would try to compromise clergy with sexual, they'd frame them for like sexual sins and things like that.
And those
so
things
Pope
did
John Paul
happen.
II, well, some didn't, but many didn't. And so I wonder if maybe Pope John Paul II had a kind of reflexive default. I don't believe that, because that's a tactic that has been used before, and it was
That's what I meant, Patrick, is that it did happen that these propaganda arms of the Communist Party, today it goes on in China all the time. Trying to spread these lies about priests and bishops. And I can see how a pope that came out of that might be very wary of people who told him this.
I agree, and it doesn't excuse it. And I don't mean to say, well, then let's give anyone a free pass. And again, I have great admiration for Pope John Paul II, with all of his flaws, and he had some flaws, let's face it. He kissed a Quran. I wish he had not done that. And there are other things like that he did that if only I had had a purpose-driven cup of coffee with him, I could have said, Holy Father, I really don't recommend.
But who among us couldn't straighten out the Pope every day? We all think that. But
exactly.
God chooses human beings to be popes.
Indeed. So that's what I'm saying. I just for the sake of fairness, it must be included in the general, as we evaluate these things, to go back to the point that Jesus made, you will know the truth and the truth will set you free. The truth as it is what's going to solve this problem. Not shading of the truth, or not spinning the truth, or not only part of the truth but not all the truth. I think it's all got to come out. And I'm confident, personally, that Pope John Paul II and Pope Benedict will come out, maybe not necessarily smelling like a rose per se, but that they will be exonerated as men who did the best they could under the circumstances that they have. And I will hope and pray the same thing for Pope Francis. And time will tell how things shake out. But I don't think we should be afraid of this big picture that does stretch back quite a long way.
Amen. Okay, Tricia in Thompson, Georgia, listening on 91.1 St. Paul Radio. Happy to have you with us. Tricia, your question for Patrick Madrid.
Yes, thank you. Tom Price, you are so funny. I enjoy you. What I wanted to ask was, I am on my way to the Catholic Church, and I'm of Reformed faith, which my husband is. He's actually a deacon in our church. And he and my pastor have become extremely concerned about me because I just started RCIA, so they know I'm serious. And what they are telling me is, our views of justification and sanctification are so different. And it's like, it's kind of funny because we don't believe you lose your salvation, but I guess they don't think I have it if I don't believe the way they do. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, Patrick, but
I am,
I'm
yes.
wanting to help.
Well, yeah, let's tackle that. I was involved in a lengthy debate, actually stretched over 2 different days. Back in '95, I debated. I headed up a 3-man team of Catholics. We debated 3 Protestant ministers, Michael Horton, Robert Godfrey, and Rod Rosenblatt. So we had a Calvinist, an Episcopal Calvinist, or Reformed Episcopal was at the time what Mike was, and then I'm tripping over the names. I just said his name a second ago. Rod Rosenblatt, a Lutheran. And so we did a debate the first day on Sola Scriptura, the second day on justification and salvation. And it was, I thought it was a great example of how both sides are, how they often misunderstand each other. And so to summarize, if anyone wanted to listen to that debate, it's available. Just go to patrickmadrid.com, and under the store, you'll find it in the digital download section. But to kind of give a brief overview, the issue of justification, which is being put into a right relationship with God. So the guilty sinner is not in a right relationship with God before justification. Now, Protestants typically, and this was expressed more or less in unison of these men who I debated in this debate I just mentioned, they purport that justification is a forensic, extrinsic, alien righteousness that is reckoned or credited to the sinner, but it's not really in him. So different analogies are used. So, for example, the righteousness of Christ, this forensic, extrinsic righteousness, is credited to the sinner in the way that maybe snow covering a dunghill would cover the dunghill, so it's all nice and pretty and it's white, but underneath it's still a dunghill. Or a robe that would symbolize the righteousness of Christ, and it's put over the guilty sinner with his ugly, nasty body underneath it, but God really only sees the robe covering him. And that's what they mean by extrinsic or forensic, that it's external to the sinner. And the Catholic Church teaches, I believe what the Bible teaches, and that is that in justification, the grace of God is poured out into our hearts, as St. Paul says, and we actually become what God decrees when we are made justified. So it inheres in the soul. One of the problems is that Protestants typically, they separate justification and sanctification as 2 separate things, when they're really actually 2 sides of the same thing. And so, to summarize, this is the problem, is that beginning with Martin Luther and then taken in a slightly different direction by John Calvin, the Protestant understanding of justification means that this is purely external. In other words, it's a legal fiction. God is saying you are justified, but you're really not. It's like wink, wink, nudge, nudge. We all know that that's the righteousness of Christ covering you, but you yourself are really not transformed. And the Catholic position, the Catholic teaching says, no, when God decrees this, it actually happens. And so the guilty sinner actually is transformed, regenerated, and justified in that act. And then the process of justification is exactly that. It's a process. So there are many nooks and crannies, and I've only given you 1 or 2 of the major themes here, so there's a lot more to say on this issue. But one book that you might find helpful is a book that I edited. It's called Surprised by Truth. There are 4 books in the series. I would recommend the first book because it's all evangelical and various other forms of Protestants, so Calvinists, Lutherans, and others, who wound up becoming Catholic as they wrestled with these issues. And justification is a big part of the testimonies in that book, Surprised by Truth. That's one. Another book I'll recommend to you, it's called There We Stood, Here We Stand. And that book is edited by Tim Drake, and it's all about Lutheran ministers who became Catholic. Very similar kind of genre of book. And so even just with those 2 books, you're going to get a great deal of the apologetics back and forth between Calvinist, Lutheran, Catholic, and I think you'll find, as I have found, that the Catholic position on this is the biblical position, and I know that drives listeners who are not Catholic crazy to hear me say that, but I would say read those books or read other books like them. Go to the Catholic Answers website, Catholic.com, and type in justification and pull up the articles and the tracts and the freebies that are there that will walk you through this biblical issue. I'm absolutely 100% convinced that the Catholic teaching on justification is the biblical teaching, and that during the Reformation there was a departure from the biblical teaching into what I would regard to be the traditions of men that nullify the Word of God.
Tricia, I'd even go so far. I'm going to add to that, Patrick. I think we'll send her a free copy of I was going to say Patrick Madrid's book, but I mean Jimmy Akin's book, The Drama of Salvation, because a lot of the stuff that is available there as well. I think you'll enjoy that book, Tricia.
I agree. That's a good book.
All right.
Thank you so much. That's awesome.
Hang on.
Appreciate you guys. God bless.
You two hang on, and Marie will get your address of where to send that book. Right now, I'm told at this very moment, I have in my hand something that tells me that we have only 100 tickets left for the conference. It's the biggest conference we've ever given here at Catholic Answers. Now more than ever, we would love you to sign up, sell it out. Cardinal Burke will be there. Dr. Stacy Trasankos will be there. Father Terrence Ehrman will be there. We're going to talk about faith and science. We're going to do the radio show twice from the conference floor this year. We're going to have a ball. Jimmy Akin will be calling some square dancing. Just go to CatholicAnswersConference.com. There's still tickets available. We want you to have them. Catholic.
By the way.
Just for the square dancing with Jimmy?
Just for the square dancing. I would like to see that.
Yep. You know what, Patrick? It's free to everybody else, but I'd be willing to charge you money to see that.
I'm traveling that weekend.
Okay, fair enough. Just go to CatholicAnswersConference.com and get your tickets now.
Call now. Catholic Answers Live.
Do you love praying for people? Have you ever wanted to use your gift of prayer to share Jesus with others and build up the body of Christ? Start a public prayer station with St. Paul Street Evangelization. Listen to people's needs, pray with them, or invite them to meet you at church. St. Paul Street Evangelization can help you get started. Find out how at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
EWTN, communicating the faith.
I had to go through fear, and thank God that I overcame the fear, and I just left it up to God, and now there's no more fear, there's just acceptance, and I'm just learning to listen. If you want to be closer to God, you just need to keep following His rules, and your application, your radio station, has helped me to always be positive and continue to listen to the rules and obey.
EWTN. Live truth. Live Catholic.
Call now with your question. 888-318-7884. This is Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live, open forum. Patrick Madrid, our guest. I'm talking quickly because we're getting near the top of the hour and I want to get as many calls in as I can. So let's go to Darren in Waco, Texas. You are next, Darren. Your question for Patrick Madrid.
Good afternoon, guys, and God bless you for your ministry here.
Thank you.
And
thank you.
I'm going to ask something that you probably have already covered, Patrick, on one of your shows, and I'm sorry I missed it. So like this Sunday, this past Sunday was the gospel where Jesus healed the man to where he could hear. He was deaf and then and mute, but he ordered him. He said, "Don't tell anyone," but yet he goes and tells everyone. Is that disobeying of Jesus' command? What's your take on that?
Well, it is, on the face of it, certainly a disobedience, because if Jesus says, don't do this, and then they go and do that, it's called the Messianic secret. That's the term for this phenomenon where Jesus does these astounding things, healing a blind or a mute and a deaf man, raising people from the dead, and all the other things that he did, in which we see him sternly, it sometimes said, instructing them not to tell anybody. So the reason for that, first of all, is that this was not their purview. This was not their job to preach the kingdom of heaven. This was going to be for the church, so the apostles and the disciples, and namely Jesus Christ himself. So I would say that on the one hand, yes, they did disobey him, but I think it's rather benign in the sense that I don't believe that Jesus would condemn them for doing so, because the people were so overwhelmed and so overcome by the amazing things that they had seen in Jesus, they couldn't help themselves. I would chalk it up to that. They just couldn't help themselves. Humanly speaking, they would burst if they didn't say something to somebody. So I see those disobediences as something rather benign, although, objectively they were disobedient. But that's how I assume the Lord looked at it, if I had to guess.
Awesome.
That works for you?
That'll work. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Another satisfied customer, Patrick Madrid.
Right on.
David, in New Orleans, Louisiana, listening on Catholic Radio New Orleans. Your question, David.
Hi. Yeah, I have a question with respect to church teaching. Oftentimes when you speak with non-Catholics, what they'll say is that the church changed their teaching on a particular issue or topic. And so, I know that, dogma and doctrine, for example, are, two forms of the church's teaching that are unchangeable. But then there's other things as well, like church councils or apostolic exhortations or things the Pope just says. And I'm not sure where to draw the line on what officially constitutes church teaching and what isn't church teaching, and if there's any set of general guidelines or any resources that we have that can help to sort of clarify what the church considers part of its teaching in general.
Okay, well, why don't we start there? I would begin by saying the Catechism of the Catholic Church, as it was promulgated by Pope John Paul II, he says that it is a sure norm, a sure guide to the faith of the Church, and a sure expression of the Church's teaching. So if you're looking for a compendium that is authoritative and the Church points to as this is kind of a complete or comprehensive explanation of the Church's teaching, that would be the Catechism, certainly. Now, as far as ancillary resources, you might want to pick up a copy of Ludwig Ott's classic book. It's called Fundamentals of Catholic Dogma. And among other things, this book will give you not just the dogmatic statements themselves, but also the evidence for them in Scripture and in the Church Fathers, and to what extent that they were, if they were expounded in a council, for example, or a papal teaching, you'll find that there. This is kind of an updated version of what theologians refer to as Denzinger, which is it's the last name of one of the two editors of this compendium that gives the monuments in the Church's history for where these different dogmas were either proclaimed or defined, for example, in a council, or which pope said something about these things. So Fundamentals of Catholic Dogma is more accessible to a modern audience, although there's still a fair amount of Latin and Greek in it, but the majority of it is in English. So those would be two resources I would recommend. Now, dogma is simply the term for the doctrine of the Church that has been formally defined. And you even see the word dogma, for example, in Acts chapter 15 at the end of the Council of Jerusalem, when the apostles and others go forth to spread the word about what was decided in this council. We see there in the Greek a reference to the teachings, or the dogma, to use the way we would say it in English. So it's certainly a biblical term, and it's come to mean, the connotation that's associated with it now is that this is where the Church, under some kind of challenge or stress, saw the need to formally declare and define exactly what her doctrine is. So some examples would be the doctrine of the Trinity and also the divinity of Jesus Christ at the First Council of Nicaea in the year 325. It wasn't as though this doctrine didn't exist before that, but it was under pressure from the Arian heresy. So it became dogma in that it was formally defined. And not all of the Church's doctrine has been formally defined, but much of it has. So that's where those two books, both the Catechism and Fundamentals of Catholic Dogma, will come in handy, so that on a point-by-point, issue-by-issue basis, you can look them up and get all that information biblically and historically. Does that help?
Sure, yeah. I guess, is there, can you clarify, what the process is? How do we know, what, for example, at a church council, that's a process that formally defines a Catholic dogma. Are there, a set of, rules or that we we understand that under these processes, under these conditions, this is when dogma gets defined?
Yes, generally speaking. So if you were to consult, for example, the First Vatican Council of 1870, the document Pastor Aeternus, it lays out the parameters for when the Pope does that, and it explains the Church's teaching on when there might be an extraordinary definition of a doctrine, which would be dogmatic at that point. And two examples that we've seen would be the Assumption of the Blessed Virgin Mary, proclaimed by Pope Pius XII, and also the Immaculate Conception proclaimed by Pope Pius IX, who was the Pope at the time of the First Vatican Council. So there would be an example with regard to that as far as the Pope is concerned. And also with regard to ecumenical councils, the general understanding is that councils deal with all kinds of issues, not just doctrines. So sometimes there are disciplines. So, for example, in some of the early councils of the Church, you'll encounter where the councils took up the question of whether or not a priest is allowed to have a female housekeeper. And so among the decrees that you'll encounter in some of these early councils is a priest can have a female housekeeper, but she can't be under the age of 60. And she has to be a widow, or she has to, there are certain practical things that the councils dealt with that were not doctrinal in nature, and other things were doctrinal in nature. So typically what you'll see would be a list of canons and decrees, such as we see at the Council of Trent. And that's where it's made very clear that these are things that the Church is decreeing or declaring on a given doctrinal issue. And then you have other councils, and the Second Vatican Council is a great example, where the Church took up questions that were not doctrinal in nature. They were more practical, or they dealt with customs or disciplines and things like that. So those would not be examples. In other words, not those things in the Second Vatican Council that talk about those issues would not be dogmatic. We could talk for hours, but I'll leave it at that.
David, thank you for that call. I'm going to keep moving because I want to get another call in before we have to go. John in Cleveland, listening on Ave Maria Radio. Your question, John.
Hi, Patrick and Si. My question relates to prayer. I'm trying to deepen my prayer life. And the question is, in what ways does our state of mind, our beliefs, and our attitudes affect the efficacy of prayer?
Great question. Well, the fruitfulness or the efficacy of prayer is rooted in the will. And so although you may be contending, as we all do, with emotions and distraction and fatigue and various other exigencies of life, the will is what ultimately will determine to what extent your prayers are fruitful. So you may be praying, but you don't feel particularly, maybe you don't feel the presence of God, or your emotions are very down, or some other thing, could be a distraction. So I think that's the answer that I've gleaned from the great masters that I've read on the issue of prayer. St. Francis de Sales, for example, or St. Teresa of Avila. They all speak about the thing that is integral or crucial for this is, what do you bring to this by way of your will? And so your emotions can come and go, they can change. You may feel very arid, you may feel very, very detached from God, but those external things, those passing things, they don't ultimately affect your prayer if your will is engaged and you really do want to communicate with the Lord. I would suggest the book called An Introduction to the Devout Life by St. Francis de Sales. He does talk about this very issue, and that might be very beneficial.
Okay, John?
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Very good. Wow. John did it. Yeah, John did that really quickly. He surprised me. How quick.
I'm the one who's the slowpoke. I take forever, so...
I don't think that is true, Patrick Madrid. You handled it with alacrity. What do you think of that?
Whoa, I like that word.
No, I'm very impressed. I think I heard Bugs Bunny say it once. A lot of my best words I got from Bugs Bunny.
Looney Tunes, huh?
Yes, right. I think I took a wrong turn at Albuquerque. Of course, that comes directly from Bugs Bunny.
But by the time you get to Phoenix, somebody will be hopefully listening to you on the radio.
Oh, that's a pop music reference, isn't it? By the time I get to Phoenix. What song does that come from?
Glenn Campbell, By the Time I Get to Phoenix.
Oh, the great Glenn Campbell. I think you're supposed to say the great before Glenn Campbell. He's a fine former Beach Boy, rhinestone cowboy. Patrick Madrid, thank you for another fine hour. Really appreciate that you take the time with us. We are not leaving, though. We are continuing our open forum. So if you're on the line, stay on the line. Tim Staples about to come in here. He'll be here in just a few minutes. If you haven't dialed yet and you've got a question about the Catholic faith, we welcome your call. Whether it's a little bit challenging for us, you want to challenge us on our Catholic beliefs, or you're just curious, whether you're Catholic or not, 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. Right back with more after this on Catholic Answers Live.
This is Dale Ahlquist of the American Chesterton Society, and you're listening to Catholic Answers Live.
So, you're listening to Catholic Radio. I think it's safe to say that you probably want to become like Jesus. Theosis is a fancy word used to explain the process of becoming like Christ. It's how God takes sinners like you and me and transforms us into who we were created to be. Basically, rockin' saints. Clumsy Theosis is a podcast where I take 2,000 years of Catholic goodness, draw from the great minds and spiritual masters of the Church, boil it down, distill it, and give practical advice to 21st century Christians. Basically, we'll learn how to do this Catholic thing like a boss. Subscribe to Clumsy Theosis wherever good podcasts are found.
Catholic Answers is a media ministry that serves Christ by explaining and defending the Catholic faith. We help Catholics grow in their faith, we bring former Catholics home, and we lead non-Catholics into the fullness of the truth. Our goal is to be the most trusted and accessible source for sharing, explaining, and defending the Catholic faith through as many media as possible, from personal contact to the most innovative means of mass communication. Have questions? We've got answers. Catholic Answers. Visit us today at Catholic.com or call us with your questions at 619-387-7200.
What difference does it make who or what you worship or what you believe? Sharing the faith used to make some people mad because it challenged their own strong beliefs. Today, it makes a lot of people yawn because they don't have strong beliefs about anything. Religious indifference is the great spiritual sickness of our age, a product of the relativism that dominates modern culture. This is Matt Nelson, and in my new book, Just Whatever, I'll take down the building blocks of religious indifference one by one. We'll look at the different kinds of indifference you tend to encounter in your friends and family members to see where they come from and why they're seductive. What you believe matters. Find out why and what to do about it in my new book, Just Whatever. You can order your copy of Just Whatever by calling 1-888-291-8000, by visiting the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Hey everyone, Carlo Broussard here. Did you know that you can arrange for me and a host of other on-fire Catholic Answers speakers to speak at your conference or parish event? Here's how you do it. Go to CatholicAnswersSpeakers.com and you'll find all the information that you need to book me or our other great speakers. That's CatholicAnswersSpeakers.com. We look forward to seeing you.
Did you know that Catholic Answers Live is on TV? What began as a monthly series on EWTN in April of 2017 is now going to be coming to you on a weekly basis. You can catch Catholic Answers Live TV Saturdays at 5 p.m. Eastern Time on EWTN, with an encore at 2:30 a.m. on Sundays. We'll also be available soon on Apple TV, Roku, and the Augustine Institute's multimedia platform, Form. Make a point of making Catholic Answers Live TV part of your weekly viewing, and we'll see you on the airwaves.
Hello, my friends. This is Christopher Check, president of Catholic Answers. I'm sure you have heard that it's still okay these days to hold to the quaint superstitions of Catholicism as long as you leave them in church, because when it comes to reality, religion is just foolishness that withers in the fierce light of science. Problem is, this narrative is false. It is in the Christian West that scientific discovery has most flourished. Still, too many of us find ourselves flat-footed when confronted with bugbears like Adam and Eve versus evolution, creation versus Big Bang, and Galileo versus the Inquisition. What can you do? Come to Catholic Answers 5th National Conference, Faith and Science. Guest speakers Father Terry Ehrman and Dr. Stacy Trasankos will join the whole Catholic Answers team to explain how faith and science are actually in harmony. September 27 to 30, right here in and San Diego. And we are thrilled to announce a special keynote address by Raymond Leo Cardinal Burke honoring the 50th anniversary of Humanae Vitae. For all the details, visit CatholicAnswersConference.com.
Welcome to Catholic Answers Live, the program where you participate with your questions about apologetics and evangelization, including the most important theological, spiritual, moral, and social issues facing the world today. Call now with your question for today's guest. Toll free 1-888-31-TRUTH. That's 888-318-7884. Now, from San Diego, Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live, open forum today on Catholic Answers Live. I am Cy Kellett, your host. Even if some people think I'm Tom Price, that's okay. If you can get compared to Tom Price, you are doing good. Our guest this hour, Tim Staples, Director of Apologetics and Evangelization here at Catholic Answers, the author of many things, including Nuts and Bolts, which is a guide that'll help you become an apologist and know your apologetics chops. And also, Behold Your Mother, a lovely book whose subtitle just ran out of my head.
Biblical and historical defense of the Marian doctrines.
Sorry, I don't know why it just, all of a sudden it just escaped.
Hey, maybe Todd was right all those years ago. He said, that title's kind of long.
Oh, that's the subtitle, though. Behold Your Mother.
The subtitle.
I mean, subtitles can be... I kind of like long subtitles.
Did you hear that? Did you hear that, Todd?
I am not speaking against Todd. No, whatever. Todd is correct. Whatever it is.
I think it was a wonderful title, actually.
Yeah, and Tim, also a world traveling speaker, will be in Australia in October.
Yes, I will.
He's going to hit most of the big cities, not Adelaide. I know that because somebody complained on Facebook.
But I have been to Adelaide, and I will be there again.
All right.
Someday, God willing. But yes.
But you're going to be in Sydney, Melbourne, Perth.
And Brisbane.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a couple of others that elude me right now.
Uh-huh.
But it's going to be wonderful. It really is. I am going to be doing more traveling, I think, than ever in Australia because I'm taking several different flights within Australia from Sydney to Perth, but also hopping around to some other cities. I am so excited. I can't stand it. I can't wait to get there.
Can I ask you a very ignorant question about Australia?
Absolutely.
This is really going to show my ignorance.
Okay.
But you've been there. Which side of the road did they drive on? Our side or the English side?
The wrong side.
They really? They took that from the Crown?
And you know what? That Charbel, I remember one time let me drive.
Uh-huh.
And I drove for about 20 minutes, and I said, I don't want to drive anymore.
You got to think your way through it.
You really do. I was going to get somebody killed, so I said, no, you guys go ahead.
Yeah, good move. Very good move, Tim Staples, father of 7. Yeah, let other people handle the dangerous things like driving.
Yes.
888-318-7884, the number. Tim, I promised people that if they stayed on the line, I'd get them on with you. So, and we got a lot of them, so shall we?
Let's do it.
All right. Bonnie in Virginia, listening on the Domestic Church Media app. I have not heard anyone call from that app before. Bonnie, glad to have you. Your question for Tim Staples.
Yes. Hello, Mr. Staples. Thank you for taking my call. My question is regarding evangelization to a family member, basically.
Yes.
I was born and raised Catholic as well as my 4 siblings, and I have an older brother who has fallen away from the church for many, many years, but he loves to read the Bible, and I know he has a heart for God. He's currently living with my parents. He's made a lot of poor life choices. He's not in a great position.
Right.
Has a lot of anger towards the Catholic Church.
Yes.
But he goes to Mass with my mother.
Huh.
And he has recently agreed to talk with me regarding his objections to the Catholic Church.
Wow.
So I was wondering if you could, I know there's so many books. My husband and I listen to the program.
Yes.
You know, we have been for, I guess, about 2 years now on this app and love it and have learned so much and grown in our faith. But I know there's such a wealth of information out there, and I'm trying to think of the best thing to start with my brother. I'm hoping maybe you can give me some advice in
Right.
guidance with him. Maybe something he said I could send him materials. I'm thinking maybe
Great.
a CD, one of your CDs.
Right.
I don't want to overwhelm him, but I know he's. I don't know exactly what he believes, but I know he's basically very fundamentalist, very sola scriptura,
Right.
and has not been going to a church prior to recently going to Mass with my mother. But he doesn't really believe in the tenets of the faith, and he doesn't really understand them. So I'm hoping
Right.
maybe you can give me some guidance.
Right. Well, Bonnie, you know what comes to mind? Conversion stories tend to be really powerful for folks like that are, because there's something about a story, where someone is struggling and they're coming from a skeptical point of view, and you can kind of travel with them and see how the light bulb went on for them. That seems to work really well. I would recommend like a book like Surprised by Truth, the first volume. I wrote one of the chapters there. It's 11 chapters. Really well written, except for my chapter. It's really well written and powerful. I think it's gripping. People will say to me often they couldn't put it down because it's stories.
Yeah.
And as my wife, who used to be in marketing, well, she still is a little bit, but I think I heard it from her first, facts tell, stories sell, right? So you might want to check that out. Surprised by Truth. It's published by Basilica Press. Excellent little book. Also, as far as books go, now more of a sort of exposition, but a really sort of basic but really beautifully written exposition from an apologetics perspective. One that really had an impact on me is Faith of Our Fathers by James Cardinal Gibbons. We actually republished that here at Catholic Answers as part of our Classics series. It was a real blessing for me to be able to write the foreword to that. But Faith of Our Father by James Cardinal Gibbons, wonderful. Now, as far as like listening, you mentioned maybe he would want to listen to something. I would recommend Jimmy Swaggart Made Me Catholic. That is a 3 CD set that I did here at Catholic Answers when I first came here about 13 years ago. And there too, it's story form, but I pack in the apologetics. I mean, it's a story, it's fun, it's funny, but at the same time, I really pack in the apologetics and answer a lot of questions that he may have. I mean, those are some examples that I'd recommend. As far as DVDs, you might want to get Why Be Catholic, a DVD that I did for skeptics that'll take you all the way from no faith at all to the Catholic, all the way to the Catholic Church. I mean, those are some thoughts that that immediately come to mind. Does that help, Bonnie?
That helps very much. And I have to ask one clarification. The name of the gentleman that wrote Faith of Our Fathers, is it the last name Gibbons?
Gibbons. Gibbons. G-I-B-B, yes. He was the cardinal.
My maiden name is Gibbons, so I thought,
oh, gotcha.
Wouldn't that be neat?
Gibbons, yeah. He was the Cardinal Archbishop of Baltimore back in the late 19th century. A wonderful, wonderful prelate in the church.
Bonnie, thanks.
That's great. Thank you so much. Very helpful.
Great. Happy to have that call. 888-31-TRUTH, the number here. Michael in Northern California is next. Michael's watching on YouTube. Thanks for watching on YouTube, Michael. Your question for Tim.
Hey, Tim. I have a quick question. I've recently entered RCIA, and I've been attending Mass more often, but I'm just very confused at times of the Mass and kind of lost and unsure what to say or what prayer to do. And if you could kind of give me a guide, or if there's any kind of resource you could recommend to me, that would be great.
Right. Yeah. A few things come to mind. There was in fact, if you go to our Sunday Visitor, they have a wonderful explanation of the parts of the Mass by Emily Stimson Chapman. And it's just called that, Understanding the Parts of the Mass. If you go to osv.com, our Sunday Visitor, real simple, but it lays out all the parts of the Mass. Kind of you go through it. Now there's also some, if you want to dive in deeper, there are some theological. I'm trying to think of the name of it now by Father James Meager. Good Lord, it just jumped out of my head. I think it's called. Well, I just lost it there. You know what? Maybe I'll have to look for it here. But gosh, what was that, man? It's a wonderful exposition of the Mass from a Jewish perspective. It's kind of it was published by Tan Books. James, I think it's Meager, M-E-A-G-H-E-R. Yes, Meager.
I'm not finding it myself, but
yeah.
So how Christ said the first Mass?
Yes, that's it.
I did find it myself.
Gosh,
my bad.
I don't know why that book really had an impact on me. That's one of the first books I read when I became Catholic. How Christ Said the First Mass. Now that's a deeper book. It's going to go into a lot more. Stimson's series there at OSV will help you on a real basic level. But if you want to dive deeper, go there. And then of course you also have Dr. Scott Hahn's book, the Lamb's Supper, which, you know, he said to me years ago, Tim, that was written for a high school level. I'm like, really?
What high school did you go to?
Yeah. Well, Scott is a very scholarly guy.
Yeah.
You know, but for simple folks like us, the Lamb's Supper is actually a really good exposition of the Mass. And it's beautiful. It's theological, but it's also quite beautiful and prayerful.
All right. I hope that is helpful to you. Michael, appreciate that call. 888-31-TRUTH, the number here. 888-31-TRUTH. Tim Staples, our guest, and it's open forum. So anybody can call with any question they got about the Catholic faith. Tim and I will both be at the Giant Catholic Answers Conference coming up September 27th through 30th.
Can't wait.
No, I can't either, but you don't have to wait very much. It's almost here.
And they're giving me 2 hours for my talk. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I'm going to take 2 hours.
I was going to say, they schedule you for one, and then Tim, there's only 56 tickets available for the whole conference, like a full conference ticket, 56 of them left.
Oh, my goodness.
And that includes the dinner with Cardinal Burke, where he'll give the keynote address.
56 left. Folks, you need to call now because they will go.
Yeah, they will go. And there's 100 tickets total. Like some of them are partial tickets, you know, for part of the conference. But there's going to be square dancing if you get the full conference ticket, live broadcast of the radio show, not just once, but twice.
And Jimmy Akin is going to call the square
He's going to
dance.
call the square. He's going to teach us how to square dance and call the square dance.
And he will teach us how to yodel.
Is that really true?
No, I'm joking.
I was going to say they need to add that to the schedule.
That's a joke, folks. That's a joke.
Tim will be giving a talk. What are you talking about? Miracles.
Miracles,
right.
my friend.
Miracles. Okay.
For the skeptic among skeptics. That will be my talk.
Jimmy, Trent, and Carla will all give talks. Chris Check, our president, will give a talk. Father Hugh Barber is going to be preaching the Masses all throughout. As I think I might have mentioned, Stacey Trasankos, Dr. Stacey Trasankos, chemist and theologian, and Father Terrence Ehrman. They'll be there as well. CatholicAnswersConference.com is where you go. You better go soon. CatholicAnswersConference.com.
You're listening to Catholic Answers Live.
Father Larry Richards.
You know, I'm from the city of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and both of my parents, both of them, were police officers. My father was a police officer, and my mother was a police officer. They always thought I'd be a cop, too, and in some ways I am, a spiritual cop. But we keep doing what we do, and we come from wherever we come from, it doesn't matter. Where God is calling us is what's most important.
Open Line with Father Larry Richards, Thursday, 3 p.m. Eastern on EWTN Radio.
Do you want to end abortion, halt the attack on traditional marriage, and ensure religious freedom for ourselves and for our grandchildren? To do this, we must convert the culture. St. Paul Street Evangelization is a grassroots initiative that recognizes this need and takes it to the streets. If you're interested in peacefully sharing the gospel in your area, visit streetevangelization.com to learn more.
Call now with your question. 888-318-7884. This is Catholic Answers Live.
Open forum today, all day on Catholic Answers Live. If you're Catholic, you can call. If you're not Catholic, you can call. Anybody can call with a question about the Catholic faith. For Tim Staples, our Director of Apologetics and Evangelization. And next up is Jordan in Detroit, listening on Ave Maria Radio. Thanks for listening, Jordan. Your question for Tim.
Hey, good evening, guys.
Yes,
so my
welcome.
question pertains to church teaching. So in the history of the church, 2,000 years, has there ever been, and as opposed to like just development and doctrine or anything like that,
yes,
has there ever been a teaching out of like a council or in the magisterium where it was clearly wrong or contradictory to other teachings or scripture or anything like that that would undermine our claim as Catholics that the magisterium is led by the Holy Spirit into all truth and that the church is the pillar of truth?
Right. There's absolutely no example where any definitive now you have to clarify that, any definitive teaching of the church, that is a church that was declared to bind the Catholic faithful to divine faith, never has there ever been a later teaching that says, oops, nope, we were wrong on that one. We're going to change that now. No, in fact, Michael, that is impossible because of the fact that Jesus Christ declared himself in Matthew 16, 18, and 19, I will give to you, Peter, the keys of the kingdom of heaven. And whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven. Whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. And he also had said, I will build my church. So it's Jesus' power. He promised that power to Peter. It's impossible then for the church to contradict itself on a definitive teaching because that would be Jesus contradicting himself, and that's impossible.
Jordan?
Praise God. That's awesome. I love being Catholic.
Okay, brother. Thank you very, very much.
God bless.
You too. Lee in Houston, well, near Houston, Texas, listening on the Catholic Answers app. You are up next. Lee, your question, please.
Hey, Tim, just a quick shout out for your speeches. I hope I don't make you too busy, but my wife and I saw you speak here in Texas, and you are a rock star, man. The amount of information you were just like saying, it was. We both looked at each other like, wow, how does he remember all that?
Was that in San Antonio when Tim was just down in San Antonio?
No, this was a couple years back.
Oh, I see. Oh, he's even smarter now.
Oh, wow. Man.
Yeah, 2 more years of work.
There you go. And also wanted to say thanks. Sorry for I'm not trying to kiss your ear here, man. But just wanted to say also thank you. You had a teaching called "The Shocking Truth of the Pope," and you dove pretty deep in biblical teaching in that.
Yes.
I guess it was like a lecture or whatever. And honestly, I'm not Catholic. I'm trying to figure all this out. I would have never believed anything you said had I not previously been listening to a rabbi named Rabbi Daniel Lapin, and I realized that was a Jewish way of teaching. Like the stories are a lot more than what's just there.
Yes.
I guess it's a Jewish tradition. They really dive deep in their
Beautiful.
stories.
Yes.
And again, I'd have thought, man, this guy's going way overboard had I not heard Rabbi Daniel Lapin.
That's right. We are so, as our good friend Rosalind Moss, now Sister Miriam, or Mother Miriam. Miriam. She's now a nun, but she used to always say the Catholic Church is so Jewish, and it's true because she's a Jewish convert, and it's so true. Our Eucharistic prayer, wonderful book, The Eucharist by Louis Boyer. It's a really rich book. But he shows how all the Eucharistic prayers, he's kind of responding to the nonsense, that we're a Babylonian mystery religion. We stole our stuff from the ancient Babylonians and all that, which is really absurd. But that's kind of the premise of the book. But he shows how our Eucharistic prayers come right out of the synagogue. The prayers that we use come right out of the barakah, the prayer of blessing in the synagogue, right to the structure of our church and altar and tabernacle and everything. It's really, really beautiful. But you're right. When Jesus teaches, he's coming out of that, rabbinical tradition. And so you do need to understand that. That helps us to understand a lot of things like his use of hyperbole and his use, his manner of teaching at times, yes, is a little bit strange for 21st century, let's say, Westerners who want everything laid out scientifically. That's not how rabbis taught. They use story because storytelling, parables, hey, I think Jesus told a couple of those.
I remember.
Parables are so, it's such a richer way of communicating, because you can communicate a lot more with a story than you can with facts. Facts put people to sleep, and they limit the scope of what you really can communicate. Whereas when you start telling stories, you open. Anyway, I'm stealing your thunder here. What you had a question about that?
Yeah, so just a couple quick, I don't want to take up too much of your time.
Yes.
Just kind of wanted your opinion. You know, when you talk to a lot of Protestants, and this is what I've noticed, and I'm not Catholic, they seem so arrogant when you talk to them about anything with the Bible, like any kind of biblical discussion. It automatically seems to, and maybe I just know rude Protestants, I don't know. But I'm just kind of curious as to what, you know, just your thoughts on that. Why is that? I mean, I know it's just,
Lee,
it's just something I've noticed over the years.
Yeah, I can absolutely tell you. I know from my own experience. When, you know, God bless our Protestant friends, it's where I come from. I love them. In fact, I'm grateful to God. I say this often, but for my pastor, Eugene Foreman, who brought me to Jesus when I was 10 years old, I will be eternally grateful. For my pastor, Gary Jenkins, one of the best preachers I've ever heard in my life. He has since gone on into eternity. But what a wonderful, I mean, I met some of the most wonderful men that I've ever met in my days as both a Baptist and a Pentecostal. But at the same time, Lee, we have to understand that when you believe in sola scriptura, it's a terrible handicap to begin your Christian life with, because sola scriptura, by definition, is based on the concept of private interpretation, which of course St. Peter condemns, you know, in 2 Peter chapter 1, verse 20 and 21. But leaving that aside for a second, what St. Peter condemns, it puts you in a terrible position that no human being should ever be placed in, to where everything depends upon your ability to interpret the Scripture. I mean, your salvation ultimately hinges on it, because you have no authority. And they'll say, well, but I have my pastors I can look at, and I can have my commentaries, and I can see. Yeah, but ultimately it's you. It depends upon you. And what it does is it breeds, Lee, pride. It breeds a sense of arrogance, because remember, I got to get it right. And then it's, well, I'm right, by golly.
Yeah.
And everything is, and it's a terrible place to put someone. And it's so far removed from what we see in the gospel. What did Jesus teach? And you know, Lee, from being at my seminar, you know, Jesus tells us in Matthew 18:15 through 18, if your brother offends against you, go to your brother. You try to hammer it out. If you can't, you take one or two with you. If you can't, you take it to the church. Jesus says there's someone that you must assent your intellect and your will to, and that is the church. And he established a church. He gave us a hierarchy with Pope, that is Peter, right, and the apostles, to whom we submit. It is incredibly freeing, Lee. I know, as from being a former Protestant, preaching in churches on Sunday, right, to being a Catholic, it's incredibly freeing when you know and you experience that there's a man who can walk in the door right here and stand right in front of you and say, oh no, Si, thus saith God, this is the truth. And you go, oh, right? Oh, knuckleheaded me. You know what, Lee? We all know we're knuckleheads. But God has given us this great gift in the magisterium, right? Now, the Pope himself and apostles, they're knuckleheads too, right? But God has given them a charismatic gift, this gift of the magisterium. And this goes back to our Jewish roots, the high priest, the idea of the prophet who says, the word of the Lord came unto me, thus saith God. This is so foundational to our Judeo, really, Christian faith. It is a travesty, Lee, when Protestantism rejects it, because they, in effect, pulled the rug out from underneath their own feet. It's the reason why you have tens of thousands. We don't even know how many denominations there are. We have such confusion morally, theologically among Protestant communities now, to where nobody believes anything anymore. I mean, try to get some agreement on, say, contraception.
Yeah, right.
Contra what? Huh? Embryonic stem cells, human cloning, any of the moral issues, abortion. You can't get, there is not a major denomination in the United States of Protestants that gets it right on abortion. Not one, right? Including the Southern Baptist Convention that says it's okay if the life of the mother is in danger. In fact, they used to be worse than that. Thank God they got a little bit more sane. But are we understanding here? Lee, this is how bad it is when you don't have the magisterium. And Lee, I recommend, I have a DVD I did called Truth and Consequences, where I go through this. I defend the magisterium of the church. I recommend it to everybody, Truth and Consequences. I go through the teaching of the magisterium of the church in Scripture, but then I show you what happens when you don't have one. But Lee, that's a long-winded answer to your question. We need to empathize, understand when you get these vehement reactions and such, and you say, wow, man, this guy seems, you know what? Don't blame them. You know, just, I recommend love them. Just listen and share the gospel with humility and with love. And I guarantee you, Lee, it works. And remember, when you have a handicap like that, you're, of course, I mean, it's amazing to me how, you know, a Protestant faith that is so deficient on a foundational level has produced the wonderful men that it has.
And, right.
I mean, the Billy Grahams of the world and so many pastors. As I mentioned, I mean, that's a testimony to the Holy Spirit, to the power of God and His will for salvation. But anyway, take that with you, Lee, and hopefully it'll help you in sharing.
We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back with more Open Forum after this. 888-31-TRUTH is our number if you've got a question for Tim Staples.
Hi, this is Father Robert Spitzer, President of the Magis Center of Reason and Faith, and you're listening to Catholic Answers Live.
Is the Church wrong on contraception? In a culture that worships the pursuit of sexual pleasure, the Catholic Church's teaching on contraception can seem archaic and unintelligible. Its critics say it's outdated, theologically unfounded, and even harmful. And even faithful Catholics can have difficulty explaining this moral teaching. Catholic Answers is out to change all of that. That's why we've just released Trent Horn's dynamic new DVD, The Case Against Contraception. Using scripture, papal and magisterial teachings, natural law, and new insights provided by social science and medicine, Trent puts forward a compelling case for Catholic teachings with his trademark charity and persuasive graciousness. Be prepared to give a defense. Order your copy of The Case Against Contraception today by calling 1-888-291-8000, logging on to the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
With the recent commemoration of the 50th anniversary of the release of Humanae Vitae, there have been fresh attacks on Catholic teaching from outside and, unfortunately, inside the Church. That's why Catholic Answers thought it critical to provide a vigorous affirmation of Paul VI's prophetic wisdom with our newest book, Inseparable: 5 Perspectives on Sex, Life, and Love in Defense of Humanae Vitae. We asked 5 distinguished contributors to reflect on and defend Humanae Vitae from 5 perspectives, each of them compelling, together forming a mosaic of truth. Don't be caught uninformed when the topic of contraception comes up among friends, family, and co-workers. Order your copy of Inseparable today by calling 1-888-291-8000 or visiting the shop at Catholic.com.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Tim Staples playing the air drums and answering your questions today. I am Cy Kellett, your host. Our number, 888-31-TRUTH. And let's go to Matt in Tennessee, listening on the Catholic Answers app. Matt, your question for Tim Staples.
Hey, can you guys hear me good?
Really good.
Welcome, Matthew. You sound like you're from Tennessee.
I am. Anyway, I was in a conversation with a Protestant friend concerning the Deuterocanicals. And, he brought up the common Protestant objection. You guys added those books during the Council of Trent. I said, whoa, wait a minute. I believe the Council of Carthage in AD 397 already affirmed the canon. Well, he brought up a few points I hadn't really heard before.
Sure.
But, I could tell it's off base, but I'd need to know how to make an intelligent response. He said that the Council of Carthage wasn't ecumenical. It didn't have the authority and it didn't quite affirm the canon anyway. He said that St. Augustine himself rejected the Deuterocanonicals, and St. Jerome actually rebuked them often. So,
oh
I
my
just needed a
goodness,
way to,
we got lots of problems here, Matt. Well, let me jump in here because Matt, somebody's playing loosey-goosey with the facts here as far as the historical facts go. Now, the bottom line is, Matt, the 7 books, and by the way, they're called the Deuterocanonical books, the 7 disputed books, and parts of Daniel and Esther are the books that are in question. Now, we know, Matt, as a matter of historical fact, that the Septuagint, which is the Greek. Now, if you want to get the closest to the thing we have to the Bible that Jesus read, it would be the Septuagint. In fact, Matt, you might want to take a note of this. Of roughly 300 times in the New Testament, the Old Testament is quoted, 250 roughly out of the 300 times, the inspired authors quote the Septuagint. Well, the Septuagint contained the books in question, like, 1st and 2nd Maccabees, Tobit, Sirach, etc. They were in there. And we know as well that, for example, in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 35, we have Maccabees referred to. When, if you go back to Hebrews 11, Matt, and read starting from the beginning, we have, this is what's called the Great Hall of Faith chapter, because it starts with Abel and goes all the way through 2nd Maccabees, recounting many of the great saints of the Old Testament and how they, stood for the faith. And it kind of reaches a crescendo there in verse 35 when it says, some refused deliverance from death in view of the promise of the resurrection. Well, the only time that happens in the Old Testament were the 7 brothers in, 2nd Maccabees 4, as I recall. But in 2nd Maccabees, who, at the insistence or encouragement of their mother, refused to, profane themselves by eating unclean foods and are put to death. So, Matt, you have Jesus when he gives us the golden rule in Matthew 7:12. It's almost verbatim from Tobit chapter 4, verse 15, where Jesus says, "Do unto others as you would not have them do unto you." Or, right, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Tobit says just almost word for word, but it says, do not unto others what you would not have them do unto you. Jesus just turns around and makes it a positive. And I could go through a litany of these examples. Even Hastings Bible Dictionary, which is a Protestant book, acknowledges that there is no doubt that St. Paul, when he writes Romans 1, is alluding back to Wisdom chapter 13, the whole idea of the creation demanding a creator and such. I mean, even Protestants like that acknowledge. We could go through more in Luke chapter 20 and such, where Jesus also refers back to an Old Testament story. So, the bottom line is this. We have evidence. Jesus and the apostles, the Bible they were raised with, had these books in them. Christians from day one acknowledged them. When there were questions about these and other books from the New Testament, of course, the church clarified. But that's true about everything. Every teaching of our Christian faith, from the Trinity, the hypostatic union, right, the divinity of Christ, the nature of revelation itself, we could go on and on and on. Of course, Jesus gave us a church to discern in these matters. But here's a very important point. Your friend got something really wrong. Now, it is true that there were, differences among even fathers of the church. For example, St. Athanasius did not accept the book of Esther as inspired. And by the way, your Protestant friend does, and so do we. But Esther in his festal, St. Athanasius in his festal letters in 367 AD does not consider Esther inspired. So there were disagreements. And there were some among the fathers who would accept books like Clement's letter to the Corinthians as inspired. The Shepherd of Hermas, the letter of Barnabas, and other books were considered inspired by some fathers. So yeah, that's a very important point to make. But here's the bottom line. It was Pope Damasus in 382 AD at the Synod of Rome that first put the hammer down on the canon and lists the canon exactly as we have it today. Carthage and Hippo would be the next year in 383. Carthage, there were three councils of Carthage in 390. There was 393, 397, and then another one in 419. But all they did was repeat the canon that Pope Damasus laid down. Now, Pope Damasus, your friend is correct, did not declare it infallibly. This was a local synod. However, it's really a testimony to the authority of the Pope that basically ended the argument in the church for 1,000 years. Mm-hmm. I mean, we had one canon in the church. Now, centuries later, around the 14th century, they were calling into question. You'd have Huss and Wycliffe and other heretics come on board, and there were real questions arose, and so the church would speak to it again at the Council of Florence in what was that, 1445, but even that was not infallible, because that was in the section of the council written to the Armenian church, not to the universal church. It would be the Council of Trent that would finally declare it infallibly in response to the reformers. But the bottom line is, Matt, to say that these books of the Bible were thrown out by the Catholics is just an absolute falsehood. The early Christians, you can read through the fathers of the church, and they reference these books all the time as scripture. You have them read in the churches throughout the world because, in fact, when the councils were considering the canon, what is the canon, one of the main criteria was, how has it been used in the liturgy around the world? Has it been received by the people of God throughout the world? And of course, is it orthodox? Is it written by an apostolic person? There were other other on the checklist that had to be checked off. But the very important point was, how is it used in the tradition? And so, Matt, I can tell you, as one who did the research on this years ago, in fact, even I started before I was Protestant doing the research on this, anybody that would tell you, for example, St. Augustine did not accept these books has never read St. Augustine. St. Jerome himself, though he called into question some, not all, in fact, he would later, it's funny, he would later himself say, those who say I said that these books were not inspired are crazy. I'm just saying, I'm recounting what the Jewish scholars say that I learned Hebrew from, because remember, Jerome learned Hebrew from St. Didymus the Blind, but also from Jewish rabbis. He said, I'm recounting what they're saying. Now, it is true, I did the research on that. He did call into question some, not all, but some of the deuterocanonical books back in those years. But once Pope Damasus declared on it, you know what St. Jerome said? I am a loyal son of the church. In fact, he was a secretary for Pope Damasus. Pope Damasus commissioned him to translate the Vulgate. So, of course, he says, hey, the Pope is right and I'm wrong. So, Matt, you have a real loosey-goosey use of historical facts here for anybody to try to say, hey, look, the bottom line is it was the Protestants who threw out those 7 books and parts of the other 2 that were understood to be canonical and inspired in the church for way over 1,000 years by the time of Luther.
And we'll leave it there, Matt, because we got to take a quick break. But thank you very, very much for that question. Right now, you can bulk up for the fall. We need to get good Catholic books into the hands of the faithful, and more importantly, those who are considering the Catholic Church. And so until midnight tonight, we're going to save you money when you do that. Free shipping within the continental U.S. on all our bulk book specials. Why We're Catholic is in there, Made This Way is in there, Delivered, Restored, Persuasive Pro-Life, and you can also get our 20 Answers bulk sampler. Just go to the bulk book specials category at shop.catholic.com, and the offer only lasts till midnight, so go soon. Bulk book specials at shop.catholic.com.
Miss a show? Make sure to catch up by downloading the podcast, available online at Catholic.com.
EWTN, communicating the faith.
I feel that God has been really doing a work in me in the last 5-10 years. I'm a convert to Catholicism, and I started to just really feel a passion to know more about the Catholic faith, and I started listening to Catholic radio all day. I'm not doing great things, but I'm doing small things with great love.
EWTN. Live truth. Live Catholic.
Catholic Answers Live is brought to you in part by CatholicSingles.com, the website for Catholics who want to meet others who share their faith and values for faith, fellowship, and love. You can learn more at CatholicSingles.com. Catholic Answers Live thanks CatholicSingles.com for their generous support.
Homeschool Connections, an online provider of courses for your Catholic homeschool, is a sponsor of Catholic Answers Live. Homeschool Connections website is homeschoolconnections.com.
Call now with your question. 888-318-7884. This is Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Open Forum. Tim Staples, our guest. Let's go to Kevin in Normal, Illinois, listening on the Catholic Answers app. Kevin, your question for Tim.
Hey, Kevin, I love Normal, Illinois. By the way, I've been there a couple of times. Have I met you, Kevin?
I don't think so yet, Tim. But
well, by golly, next time I come, you need to be there. Next time I come, okay?
I'll be here. I'll be here.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. What's on your mind, brother?
Yeah. So I'm a part of the Newman Center at Illinois State University, and I was just wondering. So the chaplain stopped doing the blood for daily mass. And I was just wondering, why is that okay, or?
Oh, sure.
Like, what's the deal with just doing the body? You know?
Right. Great question, Matt. And the key is to understand that under either species, that's the way we talk about the sacred elements, right? Under the appearance of bread and under the appearance of wine, Jesus Christ is fully present, body, blood, soul, and divinity. So you are not getting more of Jesus if you receive under both species, and you're not getting less of Jesus if you only receive under one. You're getting the entire Jesus. In fact, the only benefit of receiving under both species is purely a symbolic one. Not that that's not important. I happen to be a fan of receiving under both species, but it's in the order of grace, there is absolutely no difference whatsoever. And by the way, biblically speaking, St. Paul says as much in 1 Corinthians 11:27, where St. Paul says, whoever eats this bread or drinks this cup of the Lord unworthily shall be guilty of the body and the blood of the Lord. So notice, if you receive either one unworthily, you're guilty of both. Why? Precisely because what I said, you receive the entire Christ under both. So there's absolutely no problem whatsoever with not only not having both species on a daily mass, but even Sunday, at least when it comes to the validity of the essential nature. Now, the Church, of course, encourages both species on Sundays, but remember, even if you don't get both species on Sunday, you still get the whole Jesus, and that's good to know. Does that make sense, Kevin?
Yes, it does. That really helps me out a lot. And God bless your ministry, and us at the Newman Center are praying for you.
All right, brother.
Thank you,
God
Kevin.
bless you.
Thanks
and you
very
know
much.
What? You know, if I could put one addendum on there for Kevin and all of our listeners, it's interesting that historically the King James Bible was translated back in a time when this was a big controversy, especially in England, those who were saying, and they believed in a kind of real presence, but they were saying if you don't receive both, you're not receiving all of Jesus. And that was a big issue at that time, and that's why the original King James Bible actually, and I would argue purposely, mistranslates 1 Corinthians 11:27. A lot of folks don't know this, but if you look at the King James original version, you know, the one that Jesus wrote.
Okay, fair enough.
That's a joke, my Catholic friends, all right?
Not to everybody.
No, it's not. But the original King James says, whoever eats this bread and drinks this cup unworthily shall be guilty of the body and blood of the Lord. And now that's, I mean, a first-year Greek student knows the difference between kai and hey, right? Kai is and hey, it's just one letter, eta with a breathing mark, is or. I mean, to say that Greek scholars mistranslated that would yeah, right. No, that was a purposeful mistranslation because they were misrepresenting the truth. And that's a scary thing when you have folks that get so invested. We talked about that earlier, Cy, with the Protestant notion of private interpretation, which is absolutely unbiblical. And what it breeds this sort of, pride and arrogance. And in this instance, I would argue, even to distorting the very translation of sacred scripture.
I wouldn't want to meet God and say,
no.
Hey, why did you change that word? What? Huh?
Well,
me?
King James told me to.
888-318-7884, the number. We go now to Michael in Indiana. Oh, I didn't say thank you to Kevin. Thank you, Kevin, for that call. Michael, your question for Tim.
Yes.
Hello. What's the purpose of prayer if God knows what we're already thinking?
Oh, that is a great question, Michael. And really, as the old saying goes, Michael, prayer doesn't change God, it changes us, right? Prayer is all, in fact, everything we do as Christians, as Catholics, the Mass, praying rosaries, everything that we do ultimately is for us. Yes, it's for the glory of God, to be sure, but that's not to add anything to God. It's not like God is, oh, thank you so much for worshiping me. I feel better now. No, we're not adding anything to God. In fact,
better now.
God, that's right. God doesn't need us. We need God. And that's the most important point. And see, because, and Michael, I think your prayer is profound, your question is profound because it gets at the heart of why God created us. And he created us as free agents. God created us to be not him, right? But we are absolutely free, and therefore we are free either to accept or reject his grace. He gives us impulses. He gives us what we call in the Catholic Church particular graces that wake us up to say, wow, I need God. But he doesn't coerce us. See, he does not. Even though he knows, Michael, whether we're going to accept them or not. He knows because he's God. He can't not know. But that doesn't mean he coerces. He gives us the grace, and we have a real choice whether or not to follow him. In the same way with prayer. God... And believe me, Michael, sometimes God, in fact, often acts without us asking for anything. Thanks be to God.
Yeah.
He acts sovereignly as God. But he also waits for us because of the fact that he created us free. And ultimately, Michael, it's because of love. Right? We've talked about this before, right, Cy? It's because of love. Because without freedom, there isn't love the way you and I understand love to be. So if we're not free to respond to him in prayer, then there's not love. And that's what this whole thing, Tina Turner, love's got a lot to do with it, right? What's love got to do with it? Actually, it's got everything to do with it. But does that get at what you're asking, Michael?
Yeah, I'm not really a good prayer, and I often resist prayer.
Yeah, well, Michael, you know what I would highly suggest is take the time, just sit in God's presence and talk to him. Talk to him, because that's what prayer is. It's, you know what, and you want to, the best way in my humble opinion, Michael, the best way you could start your prayer is, you know what, God, I really hate praying. I really don't like praying. And you know what you're doing? You're praying.
Yeah.
When you just open up and share and then start learning prayers. As Catholics, we've got all these wonderful prayers. Learning the Our Father, the Hail Mary. Saying prayers is important, but also talking to God as well. And what ends up happening is you develop a friendship with God, and you're able to. I have a wonderful nun who's a dear friend of mine for many, many years, Sister Rose Dolores. I hope she's listening right now. One of the holiest women on this planet. She's near 90 now. She's incredible. But whenever I take my kids once a year up to Los Angeles to visit her, and my kids love her, and she can't travel anymore. And we go up there, and she always prays with us right when we get there, and then before we leave, we go in, and I love it. She walks right up to the tabernacle. She puts her hand on the tabernacle, and she just starts talking to Jesus. And she says, you know what, Jesus, thank you so much for bringing Tim and Valerie and all the kids. Thanks for bringing them to me. I love them so much. And she's, oh my gosh, it melts your heart.
Yeah, right.
And my kids get to witness this beautiful woman, this nun who has a relationship with Jesus like nobody you've ever heard. Michael, that's what you and I need to develop. And it's just a matter of talking to God, spending time with him, and then letting him know what you need. You praise him for who he is. He is God. Thank you. And for giving me the grace to even be able to acknowledge you right now. It's a matter of giving thanks to him. And then you let him know, Michael, gosh, I really have hated prayer up until this point in my life. I really do. I struggle with this. I struggle with that. I struggle with that. And it's amazing what can happen, Michael. Before long, you've been there for a half hour.
Yeah, and you've prayed.
And you've prayed, and it feels like you've been there for 5 minutes. Does that make sense, Michael?
Yes, and I really appreciate that. It was very helpful.
Michael, thank you very, very much for that call. We appreciate it. But let's try to get one more in before we have to go. Mark in Ontario, Canada, listening on 101.7, which is a station in Buffalo, New York. Mark, your question for Tim.
Thanks for taking my call. My question is, my understanding is that Jews, Muslims, and Christians all claim to worship the God of Abraham.
Yes.
Now, although not revealed, am I mistaken in thinking that the God of Abraham is the Holy Trinity?
Yes, absolutely.
No, is he mistaken?
The God of Abraham? No, you're not mistaken at all. Oh, I'm sorry. I said, yes, you are mistaken. Oh, no. No, I'm sorry. The God of Abraham absolutely exists for all eternity. Exists for all eternity as Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. That is absolutely true. But of course, that was unknown to Abraham. That was unknown to David. That was unknown to all of the Old Testament saints, because it cannot be known apart from the revelation that was given to us in and through Jesus Christ. But you had a follow-up on that.
Yeah, I guess my follow-up is the Jews and Muslims, when they claim to, I know, as you said, it was not revealed.
Yes.
But are they not following the true nature of God?
No, they are. And it's a very good question, Michael. But in our, Catholic understanding, for example, in Nostra Aetate in paragraph 3, also in Lumen Gentium, we have from the dogmatic constitution on the Church, right at paragraph 16. In the Catechism of the Catholic Church, paragraph 841, the Church teaches, and this is a very important point you bring up, that inasmuch as a Jew or a Muslim believes that God is one, and absolutely one, in fact, they're closer to us than Mormons, by far, light years closer than Mormons, they've got it right.
Yeah.
In fact, when the Quran says that God is self-subsistent, infinite, almighty, and absolutely one, they're absolutely right, as are the Jews in the great Shema, of course, of Deuteronomy 6, 4, and 5. Hear, O Israel, the Lord thy God is one. God is one. As Catholics, as Christians, we don't say God is three. Oh, no, he's not one, he's three. No, God is absolutely one. But he, has revealed himself, that within his inner life, subsisting within that infinitely, absolutely simple divine essence, there are Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, relationally distinct, like my being is from my intellect, is from my will in Tim Staples, right? I am, I know, and I will. Three relationally distinct realities, but subsisting in one being. I'm not three beings because I have my being, my knowing, and my willing. God is not three beings because he is Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, analogous to that. So it's a very important point. So I say all that to say this. in as much as they say God is one, guess what? They got it right. God is one. They've got his nature correct. But what they don't understand is the fuller revelation that within his inner life, there are those three relationally distinct persons, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. But because they don't have that revelation, doesn't mean, oh no, they're wrong about
the first part.
About the first part.
Yeah.
They've got it absolutely right. It's a great question, though, Michael.
Thanks, Michael, very much. Would that be true of somebody, say, like Aristotle, who maybe reasoned to the idea that there was one God?
Absolutely.
If you say there's one God, you're talking about God.
You got it.
Fair enough. Tim Staples, it was too short, just an hour with you, but thanks for being here.
All right, brother. God bless you.
And if you're in Australia, look it up. Tim's going to be down there to visit with you. Tomorrow, two old friends we haven't seen for a while will be back. Father Vincent Serpa will be here first hour to talk about your spiritual life. And the second hour, Rose Sweet. We're going to talk about marriage, divorce, and annulment. We'll see you then, God willing, on Catholic Answers Live.